The Bible is at least 2000 years old. The Bhagavad Gita is suspected to be a few thousand years older. And in fact, I think you can assume similar timelines for the Quran and even other spiritual literature. Now, I don't want to get into the exact timelines of these spiritual literatures, but the point I'm getting to is that spiritual growth and expansion of consciousness are projects that human beings have talked about and written books about and thought about for at least a few thousand years now. And based on which culture you are born into, based on which books you read or which teachers you listen to, you end up subscribing to one particular kind of spiritual growth. And yes, there are different kinds of spiritual growth, aren't there? Because just a very simple example, someone born in a Christian household would associate spiritual growth with being a firm believer in Christ, I suppose, and even that would have various different groups. And similarly, someone born into a Hindu household in India would have a very different idea of spiritual growth, especially from Christians, but also from amongst other Hindus. Now, this is where it gets interesting though. If and when spiritual growth ends up resonating with you in your life, you end up subscribing to any of these projects, any of these spiritual growth projects, based on factors that are almost out of your control. Like I mentioned above, the books you had access to, the culture you were born into, what your parents taught you, what your teachers taught you, what your friends around you were practicing, what social media apps around you were telling you, etc., etc. Based on all of these factors, you end up subscribing to certain spiritual growth projects without even knowing the end goal of those projects. Now, isn't that fascinating? That is exactly what today's video is all about. Rocco Jarman walks us through the swarm of different spiritual growth and consciousness expansion projects that human beings can practice and do practice already, and he helps us group them into two, just two, based on the end goal of those spiritual projects. Now, that is what I call a fascinating conversation. And it indeed is a fascinating and an eye opening conversation. So, I would request you to put aside your favorite beliefs and your favorite preconceived notions about what spirituality and religion and higher consciousness should look like. Just with an open mind and an open heart, get into this conversation, and I'm sure you'll not end up regretting it. And before we do that, subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. And now, let's get into it. I want to dial it down slightly to your example of the Plato's cave, where we would say a baby is born from the womb and it's born into a paradigm. Okay. So now let's talk in terms of consciousness. So this baby, a few years from its birth, has developed a sense of self, has developed a sense of what it is like to be it, right? A sense of
Yes.
I, a letter I. And that's its consciousness right now. And then invariably, like you say, that baby will outgrow that paradigm. Not
Might
invariably,
not,
might not, yes.
but
But
it will outgrow some of its paradigms, or the
yes,
paradigm will evolve and shift over time. Yeah. Yeah.
yes. And that is the sense of self expanding. That is the consciousness expanding there, right? And then it keeps expanding into, let's just call it higher and higher paradigms. Some of them, some of those paradigms could
No,
be limiting too.
you can actually go into worse corners or equally
Hmm.
bad corners of the cave, or
Yeah,
slightly better corners, but still being told that don't worry, those fools looking at that corner of the
yeah,
cave, they're wrong, but
yeah,
we've got the enlightenment, we're looking at the
yeah.
right corner of the cave.
Yes, exactly. That is the point where I wanted to get to, because for a lot of people, the mere fact that they're revolting against the status quo feels like they're expanding their perspective, they're expanding their consciousness. While it could exactly be what you just described, you could be falling into another cave. You could be falling into a cave that's actually lower or not higher than the cave where you could be. It could
Or
be
just
worse than where you
different forms of delusionment, you know?
Yes, it could be one more is that you're falling into,
Yes.
right?
Now, if you drop the paradigm of the Plato's cave and you
Hmm.
just imagine like a tesseract or a jewel, you know, if you look at a
Hmm.
jewel and you turn it like this and you look into it, you can see like a kaleidoscope of images.
Hmm.
You know, sometimes you're just turning a lens the wrong way, or you're just looking at something from a different perspective.
Hmm.
That perspective might be aligned more with your wiring and with your dharma and with your
Hmm.
how you, through whatever confluence of mechanisms, biology, DNA, feel more comfortable interacting with the world. So that's why some people, it makes sense to them to become hippies, or it makes sense to them to become like influencers on Instagram, because they've got a knack to it. They feel like they can win the game doing this. They've got no scruples or concerns about spamming people, millions of people with emails or messages. This works for them, right? The world is like Indra's web. And certain people are just configured or wired for more or less for different kinds of experiences or for different kinds of defaults.
And
One
then the
way,
project could be,
yeah.
yeah, I want you to complete your thought first, Rocco. Go on.
No.
One way.
We got to the
Okay.
end.
I was saying, then the project could be to always being more aware of the paradigm you're in right now, the paradigm you're operating from, and maybe keep looking for better ways, keep looking for a higher perspective of doing things, because I
But
would
even
want to
that can be
Hmm.
flawed.
Yeah, based on the lens that is viewing, of course, right? I mean, even the words better and worse can be relative, and
No,
you.
just even assuming that there is a better,
Hmm.
you need to understand, just like meditation, you need to understand the project. Otherwise, you can't be really making assertions. That's a bit like saying, when there was the practice of meditation, without the project of why you're meditating, you're now trying to make comments about what better and worse meditation is. Without understanding the project, you can't make comments about whether somebody should stay where they are, change, shift, grow.
Okay.
Right.
No,
Is that
so
making sense?
it is. I was trying to tie it back to the conversation we were having about consciousness and expanding one's consciousness.
Me
And to
too.
that effect,
Me
hmm,
too.
hmm,
But I'm trying to draw a parallel between what we were discussing just with meditation.
hmm,
We learned something surprising in that conversation, is that, are there more and less skillful ways of doing meditation? Yes.
yes, yeah,
But the more and less skillful can only be called more and less skillful once you know what the project is.
correct, yes,
Right.
yes,
So defining what the project was separating the impulse from the response, so that.
hmm, hmm, hmm,
Now, that means that has a utility. Now,
hmm,
if you ask the Buddhists what the so that is, they will say, so that you can see the illusion of self, you
hmm,
can eventually surrender this illusion of self, so
hmm,
that your consciousness in the room can merge with the consciousness of the all,
in the
and the
source.
window and the room disappear.
Yeah,
And
yeah,
all there is the light.
yeah,
Right. That's what they say, the so that.
hmm,
And
hmm,
what I'm trying to allude to is that we don't have a single so that.
hmm, hmm,
We
hmm,
have three.
hmm,
Well, you can either call it two or three, but then when you see that they are two and you see that they are different, the earlier conversation we had is, when you see 2 points of the triangle and they don't seem to make sense, the only way they make sense is via the third point of the triangle.
hmm, yeah,
So can we look at that diagram?
yes, yes.
Right. So I will swap my settings. I will minimize this and I will share my screen. That.
Yes.
Right. So what I want to bring attention to is consciousness, we're saying, can be expanded or shaped or focused or dialed, but to what end?
Hmm.
And what I'm saying, the project, what defines the project is what you do with will.
Hmm.
So remind me of that name of Viktor Frankl's book again.
The will to meaning.
The Will to Meaning. Right.
Yeah.
Right. So we're saying that the Buddhist project is the project
Hmm.
of no self.
Hmm.
It's what they are trying to merge with is pure consciousness.
Hmm.
And it's the project of surrendering of the self, of this capacity of will, via
Hmm.
consciousness and heart alignment and practices.
Hmm.
These require definitions, but sure. So we've defined
Hmm.
consciousness a bit. Heart
Hmm.
alignment means coming from love, not fear.
Hmm.
You know, in one sense, if you go slightly outside of the Buddhist project and you look at the Hindu project, this heart
Hmm.
alignment would be Dharma.
Hmm.
Mm?
Hmm. Hmm. Yes.
And practices is, you know, how you conduct your life,
Hmm. Interesting.
structured and
Yeah.
unstructured, you know.
Yes. Yes. Yes.
And then we go at the opposite. The other, this is more like Taoism, right?
Hmm.
Where the surrender is of the will is to the cosmos or to nature or to the Tao, the flow of life. Where there
Hmm.
is a self retained, but the self doesn't expand in will because the will that exists is
Hmm.
in alignment with the will of nature via consciousness, heart alignment, and practices.
Hmm.
Hmm?
Rocco, can you build an image for me in terms of the room that we were talking about, the room that has an aperture from where light is flowing in, to that effect?
You mean you want to break out of this and draw a picture of a room?
No, no, no. I mean, I can picture the no self part, the Buddhist
Oh,
Hindu
right,
practice
right, right.
from
This
there.
is where you realize that the room is not a room, it's a garden with a heartbeat, and there is a kind of selfhood to everything that you can acknowledge and honor. You can see the river wants to go this way, the mountain wants to be that. It's
Mm,
the project of Taoism that people can
mm,
attach to in different ways
yeah.
because there's degrees of surrendering self here, and there's a degree of surrendering the will to nature. Sometimes they want to do
Mm,
it as an individual, which is Tao.
mm,
Sometimes they want to do it as a community, which are hippies.
mm, 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 mm,
Sometimes they want to do it as a society, you know.
mm, mm.
But
And
yeah,
mm, both of them, Rocco, the nature and the no self, both of these expansions of consciousness sound a lot similar to me. In the sense, even in no self, it is almost like saying the self merges with the source. And here, it's
here,
the
but
self is.
the ultimate project is the complete surrender of self. That's the gold prize here.
Hmm.
Is the you realize that the self is an illusion and you
Hmm.
transcend it altogether.
And
Here
this
they
is like the
like
self
being a
is an
self in
instrument.
relationship with
Hmm.
the self of everything,
Yeah. So the self is like an
but they're
instrument
not
of the mother.
imposing their will on nature. Here they're not going to build other outside temples. They're not really going to do much. They'll build cities that they need, but there's not going to be there's no um, scientific breakthrough happening here.
Hmm. Mm,
Nobody in this camp on the left is
hmm.
incentivized like a capitalist or an industrialist or a expansionist.
No,
So
Rocco.
let's put real world examples here. Here you
Hmm.
could carry on, but humanity would not be tearing through barriers of technological evolving the way we are at the minute. Here, there wouldn't even be societies, there would just be monasteries. This
Hmm.
is an exit strategy And this is a complete alignment strategy, right? Which means you need this to facilitate that. Because if there weren't villages of people that loved the all and practiced a bit of surrender, and then how would these people get their food in their begging bowls? Because they're not having children and they're not building cities, right? These people still are. Okay, but this is the two projects of what to do with our will. Now, religion and personality cults and capitalism is all down here in the cave. Right. And here in capitalism, you surrender your will to the will of the wealthy or the will of the powerful, the kings and the emperors, you know. And the promise that you're chasing is that you're also going to get status and reward, more power, so that you can feel empowered in this triangle of power this pyramid of power that they create. Personality cults is like populism. It's like North Korea. It's like any time that you're surrendering the will of a person to a party or to another person or to a family or to a regime.
Or a nation for that matter.
Or a nation, exactly right. So it can be nationalism as well.
Yeah.
The promise is then towards manifest destiny. You are part of a whole. You are special because of that.
Yeah.
And we are going somewhere awesome.
Yeah.
Right. And religion is the surrender of your will to the will of a deity, the commandments, this is what I say so. This life doesn't mean much. This is just the beginning, the test, so that you can see how I can sort you in the afterlife into the good category or the bad category. This is life is a sorting, which it is. It's sorting for the next incarnation or the next evolution or the next whatever, the next emergence. But they've got a frozen story over here which says, no, it's being sorted, but it's only being sorted until the day of reckoning, or until I bring about the paradise on earth, you know, and then there'll be a judgment, and then you go over here, these guys will go there. These are my favorites. It's a sorting process, right?
Yeah.
And then we break out of these things when we become sick in them or disenfranchised in them, or we have some form of tragedy in our life for which these paradigms don't satisfy us anymore. Over here, our sense of daddy is God or priests or gurus. Over here, our sense of daddy is a party leader or a king. Right? And you can see any expression of will here is equal to arrogance, is equal to sin, is equal to you didn't earn your dues. Here, you're being disloyal to the team. Here, God is going to get you.
Yeah.
Right. And then you have this initial awakening, which might be into Integram Stoicism or esoterica, like learning about Hermetics and Kabbalah, or weekend Buddhism, where I like the ideas, I like the concepts, but I'm not going to an ashram. Or I might even go to ashram for a few years, but I realize after a few, it's not good for me. It's not what I want to do with my life, right? Or it's Instagram spirituality. And for a long time, I judged these people. I thought, bunch of clowns, right? Because let me give you the negative. They cluttering up all of the airwaves, all of the content on social media is all this shit if it's not this shit.
Yeah.
Right. But I am searching for a way to get where I want to go. But these people were just searching for a way out of the horrible corner of the cave that they were stuck in.
Yeah.
And they caught a ticket to ride, and their ticket was was not to the top or out of the game. It was just out of that terrible place that they were in into a better place where they can connect with other people who agree with them. What they were secretly looking for was an improved paradigm and connection, community. They wanted to belong to a group who thought like them. And that's how we subscribe to Instagram Stoicism and Instagram spirituality and, shallower, relatively shallower versions of Hinduism, of Buddhism, of Kabbalah, of all these schools and traditions we have, the reason that the shallower versions exist is not because people are worthy or unworthy or because they're good or bad. It's because that's where they are comfortable. But for people like very devout Buddhists, they are not comfortable. They are only comfortable in the community of Buddhists under the project of, at the end of this, you can surrender the self. But they don't know that another option exists, that you can surrender yourself like the Taoists do to the will of nature while still living a very happy, full human existence. You know, a lot of practitioners in Zen, they say the point of Zen is to achieve enlightenment. And then the point after that is to put down the project of Zen and carry on doing what you were doing with your life. Right. That is somewhere here. Not here. Then the surrender of consciousness, of will, sorry, was used as a utility to break through, to get a sense of liberation or freedom, which means this whole project is about escaping suffering. And
Share
this
your screen
project
again,
is
Rocco.
about reframing your relationship with the world, so you stop seeing things as suffering. So the Stoics and the Taoists, they go, just, it will or it won't, man, you know? It'll get there in the end. This is the will of God. What happens of interest to me is this purple flower and this green spiral when you see them interacting with each other.
Rocco, share your screen again.
All right, sorry, my bad.
Yeah.
This project over here is that when somebody joins the Buddhist monastery from their village, they don't know that there's a similar but different project. They don't know that. So when we see Buddha, we're still thinking that there's only one there.
Yeah.
There's only one project to spirituality. There's only one project to enlightenment. There's only one project to philosophical growth or expansion. There's only one project. So consciousness is so that you can take this journey. What the journey is what you want to do with your will. But we don't realize that there's more than one project. Right. So you can't really talk about consciousness without talking about will. Even though will and consciousness are not the same thing. They are the two capacities which are enhanced and nuanced in our projects of going this way or going that way. And the
I have a
project...
crude question, Rocco.
Yes?
These two paths, the purple path and the green path, let's say someone subscribes to the purple path, the no self, the Buddhist, Hindu path, and let's say they have achieved the no self state. Now I understand that's a paradox in itself. I have achieved no self.
Yes,
but,
yes. But we know what
we
you
can
mean,
talk.
yes.
Yeah. But you've achieved that. You're still alive as a human being. Correct? You're living a life. Isn't that life
Correct.
very similar to the life on the green side where you are
It
now...
has to be. Let's just be very clear. Can you see the video in the middle of the shared screen or not?
The video?
Never mind. Never mind.
Hmm.
So this is where I think it starts getting really intelligent. This is philosophy now. We're not talking about good or bad, right or wrong. We're talking about how to understand what we're discussing. It actually points to a fallacy, a flaw, a mistake, a confusion. Nobody noticed this in Buddhism.
Okay.
Which is, Buddhism is a human project. Whatever supernatural claims are made about saints and bodhisattvas, who knows? Can't be proven, can be speculated. But what you do know is the people that are prescribing it, sharing it, teaching it, practicing it are humans.
Are humans. Correct. Yeah.
Right?
Well put.
Humans have a body,
Yeah.
and the body is a product of emergence. An emergence out of genetic reproduction and an emergence out of the environment that sustains both the genetic reproduction and the gestation and the birth and the growth and the development of this so that it can give rise to a body that's similar to everyone else's body. Because when you practice Buddhism, they tell you how to sit, they tell you, which means you're instructing a human on how to pursue the project of Buddhism. But the aim is to do as the Buddha prescribed, which is to transcend self.
Okay.
Am I wrong or am I right or am I?
No, I feel that
Yeah.
you would still be in a body, though, right? I mean,
But the point is, you will still be in a body, unless it's like Kung Fu Panda, where you just turn into sparkles and or peach blossoms and flow off into the wind. We don't turn into peach blossoms and flow off into the wind. We rot and turn into muck. So we now start assuming that the project of Buddhism is an escape velocity. But the entire project up until then required the side booster rockets and the third stage rockets to get it to the escape. But what that project is beyond the point that the body disappears, there's Buddhism talks about that.
Yeah.
But we can't, it's not the kind of thing that we can imagine from here. We can't, as the caterpillars, have a conversation in butterfly language. We just, who knows, right? I can tell you what I speculate, but I don't know how useful that's going to be to everybody here. And so a lot of people that look at Buddhism, you must remember, they look at Buddhism assuming there's only one there. That they still think all religions are equally true or whatever, and that we're all ultimately going towards the same thing. That's what people think simplistically. But Buddhism is a very unique project. The project is to negate this idea of self, and the Tibetan Book of the Dead is the practices by which you can do that at the moment of death, so that you can jettison, you can either help steward a consciousness towards a different kind of incarnation and experience, but you can also steward yourself right out of the game.
I see. Okay.
Because that's the only way to end the suffering, is to end the self. That's the deal of samsara, right? If you're attached to the cycle of birth and death, you will know suffering. The only way to liberate yourself is to liberate yourself from the wheel of birth and death. Samsara, the illusion. You transcend the illusion, and then you're a cloud of peach blossoms. Off you go. We have to admit that that's the project, but no one ever sat down and said there's more than one project. So even people that subscribe to Buddhism, they're looking to get there. They don't know why, they don't know how, in my paradigm, I'm told that there's a there, and these guys have been doing this for a few thousand years. I like their brochures, I like their pamphlets, I like their guys, I want in. And then they do it for a while until it starts dawning on them that the authentic requirement is to lose yourself. And then they realize they don't want to do that. And then they think Buddhism's not for them. But luckily, Buddhism observes laity, which means there's such a thing as an urban Buddhist. You know, you practice all the same teachings and you apply all the same wisdom and all the same philosophy. But you don't do it as if you're trying to hit escape velocity. You do it more like on the project on the left.
Yes.
And then the project on the left has a purist expression and a very mundane expression and millions of kinds of expressions. And Auroville is such an expression in community.
Yes.
But what they're trying to do is not just raise consciousness, but create a receptacle for people to practice the project on the left
mm.
and realize that in the world.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
But
And they actually use those same words, the mother. They have very similar terminology.
that is fascinating.
Yeah.
That is fascinating.
Yeah,
Right.
they have, there is Sri Aurobindo and the mother who were collaborators, but the way they use the word the mother is actually the way you're using it. Surrender to the will of the mother. They call it the Mahashakti. There are various
Wow,
other
that's
words for it.
fascinating.
Yeah,
Fascinating.
yeah,
Fascinating.
yeah.
And
Mm,
so yoga in general is a
mm,
co-opting of the will and the body and consciousness. That's why yoga
mm,
is such a profound technology,
mm,
because you're using the will
mm,
to and to marshal the consciousness, to pay
mm,
attention to the body and pay attention to the will of the body and the will of nature,
mm, mm, mm,
and bring all of those things into alignment.
mm,
Yeah. Yeah.
mm. Very interesting.
Now, if we can take a 5-minute break,
Mm.
I want to come back and talk about the middle way.
Yes, yes. This is where we thought we'll pause today's video. The next video in this series, which will be part 4 of the consciousness series, will be a continuation of today's conversation where Rocco will walk us through the middle path, the third path. Parts 1 and 2 of the consciousness series have already been released out, of course. If you haven't checked them out yet, I would highly recommend you to do so. These are all standalone videos with absolutely crystal clear messages in their own rights, and I would recommend checking them out to actually better understand the work Rocco and I are trying to put together in this series. I would also recommend checking out more of Rocco's work. Everything is available on his website, roccojarman.com. The guy is an absolute genius. You won't regret spending any time consuming more of his work. Remember, part 4 comes out next week. I'll see you in the playground soon again. Until next time, peace out.